This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, we're still short a couple of presenters, but hopefully they'll show up and we'll get started. Okay, so you just need to move that over to the other screen. You want to use the browser where you put the camera. Is there already the Google Drive? Yeah, Drive. Yeah. Oh, it looks like everything's working. Okay. Yeah, you can just present that one and then move the other. All right, hi everybody. So today, what we're going to be doing is talking through various different kinds of platforms that you can use for collecting large-scale data. So this morning we have a bunch of short advertisements for different platforms, and then a subset of those platforms we're going to have tutorials. So the tutorials are organized into two sessions. We have one morning session, and then we have a short presentation at the end of that, and then we have lunch, and then we have another tutorial session in the afternoon. And then we're aiming to end around 3 p.m. So we're going to run through pretty quickly, I think, through all of our speakers this morning, and then we'll have our break and then split up for our first tutorial. So Josh, do you want to take it away? Josh is going to be presenting a tutorial in the first session of this morning.
So I'm going to be giving a tutorial on jsPsych. So jsPsych creates experiments that run in a web browser. And I'm going to switch over because my video is on. But this is the experiment that we'll make. So it's a classic sort of lexical decision kind of experiment, something that you might run in the lab. Looks like this. It's hard to see on the projector, but there's feedback that's being given about the correctness of a response. So you can see, let's see how answering correctly, you can see the box turn red. So we'll look at some basic features. How do you set up an experiment? How do you do things that are more dynamic? How do you load lots and lots of stimuli into the experiment, and so on and so forth. In addition to sort of more lab-like experiments like this, you can also do pretty much anything that you want to do that can be run in a web browser. So I've shown this a couple times, but this is also jsPsych. It's just a very different kind of interface for showing the experiment. So if you want to run a pretty normal-looking lab experiment, you can do that, and that's pretty easy to get set up with. And if you want to scale up to this, you can do that as well with the same general platform. So jsPsych is built around this design philosophy that what we're all doing is basically doing the fourth grade science fair thing over and over and over again. We're running similar kinds of experiments to each other that we can borrow and share pieces from with small variations. So something that you develop to run in a browser should be, in theory, useful for somebody else that is also wanting to run a similar kind of experiment. Not just other people, but also yourself. So if you run multiple variations of the same kind of experiment, having reusable tools that you can sort of quickly abstract and repurpose for a new kind of experiment is sort of the aim of the whole library. So the way that jsPsych accomplishes that is through this plugin architecture. You write files that define plugins. Plugins are sort of atomic tasks or units of the experiment. They allow you to do something like show an image on the screen and get a keyboard response to that. Or they allow you to do something much more sophisticated, like a level of a video game. And you can abstract something simple to a task into a plugin, or you could extract something very complex into a plugin. And it's really up to you as the designer to figure out sort of what the right level of abstraction is. jsPsych, these plugins, there's a template that they follow, but it's a very strict template, but it's also enormously flexible in the sense that you can pretty much put anything you want into the template. And then by having a strict template, it ensures that any plugin that you write will be compatible with any plugin that anybody else writes. So I could share a piece of my experiment with you. You could repurpose that for your own experiment. And the plugins also sort of each plugin provides a set of parameters that you can adjust that allow you to sort of repurpose that plugin for new experiments. So for example, if a plugin is to show an image and get a keyboard response, parameters will include things like what image is on the screen, what keys are people allowed to press, how long should the image display on the screen, is there a timeout, so on and so forth. The current distribution of jsPsych that's available on GitHub has 38 different plugins. These range from the really sort of general purpose, show an image, get a keyboard response, to things that are very specific, like random dot kinematograms that people have created. Since I'm doing a promo, let me give it a couple more features. So in addition to these plugins, there's a sort of an interface for combining things together. I think it's intuitive, and this allows you to create sort of a flow through the experiment. So how do we transition from one plugin to another? How do we organize trials? Do you want looping structures? Do you want repeated structures? Do you want conditional things that depend on what people have done before in the experiment? Anything that you can do on the web, you can do in jsPsych. Doesn't mean it's the easiest tool to do things that you can do on the web, but it's possible to do pretty much anything that you want to do. The documentation is pretty good for an open source project. So there's several tutorials, and there's a pretty extensive set of documentation. It's actively developed, so you don't have to worry about things sort of becoming out of date with current web standards. Had lots of success with undergraduates who are brand new to programming. You can give them the tutorial. They can have never developed anything for the web, and they can sort of create the shell of an experiment within a week of work. Any experiment that you develop can be run in the lab or online. It's just a web browser, so you can open up a web browser on a local machine. So you can use this to do sort of both the lab and web-based development. We've even hooked jsPsych up to things like our EEG equipment and sent timing triggers through jsPsych to. And then finally, I think in line with this workshop, the jsPsych plays really nice with some other tools for massive online experiments. So Josh Hartman's going to talk about Pushkin, and jsPsych serves the experiment engine for Pushkin. So if you come to this tutorial, the goal is that we're going to build a mostly complete laboratory experiment in under 90 minutes. A little ambitious, but I think we can do it. And depending on the interest level and expertise